I always knew my parents favored my sister Madison, but I never thought they would take away something that was meant for me and hand it to her without a second thought. For years, they promised they had a wedding fund set aside for me until the day I actually needed it. That's when they told me they had already given it all to Madison for her house. When I confronted them, they called me selfish. When I set boundaries, they called me cruel. And when I finally decided to cut them off, they couldn't believe I would actually go through with it. But I did. And just when I thought I had left them behind forever, they came back, begging me for help when Madison's perfect life fell apart. For the first time, I had all the power, and this time, I wasn't going to save them. My name is Anna Carter, and for as long as I can remember, my family has made one thing painfully clear. I was always second to my sister, Olivia. I'm 24 years old, the oldest daughter of Margaret and Richard Carter, and I grew up in a house where love and support were given freely, but only to Olivia. She is 2 years younger than me, 22, and from the moment she was born, it was like the entire world revolved around her. She was the golden child, the pretty one, the talented one, the one who could do no wrong. Me, I was the extra, the afterthought, the one who had to work twice as hard for half the love. I wasn't jealous, I wasn't angry, at least not at first, but as I got older, I started noticing how deep the favoritism ran. It started with little things, the ones that seemed small at first but piled up over the years until they were impossible to ignore. When Madison and I fought as kids, it was always my fault, even when she started it. If she took my toys, if she ruined my drawings, if she broke something that belonged to me, my parents would always say, "Be the bigger person, Anna. She's younger than you. She doesn't know any better." But when I made a mistake, I was scolded immediately, told I should know better because I was the older one. It wasn't fair, but I told myself it was just sibling stuff. When Madison wanted something, she got it. A new bike, dance classes, gymnastics, school trips. Whatever she showed interest in, my parents made sure she had the opportunity. Me? I was always met with, "Do you really need it? That's expensive. Maybe next year. You're responsible. You'll understand." I tried to convince myself they were right. I was older, more mature. Maybe it was normal to expect me to be the responsible one while Madison got to enjoy things freely. When she needed help in school, my parents hired tutors for her without hesitation. They sat with her for hours during homework time, making sure she understood everything. I had to figure things out on my own. I was always expected to be self-sufficient. "You're smart, Anna. You'll manage." When Madison struggled, they worried. They jumped into action. When I struggled, they assumed I'd be fine. And that's when I started to realize the difference. At 16, Madison got a brand new car for her birthday. She had barely passed her driving test, but my parents still surprised her with a shiny SUV topped with a bow like something out of a movie. I still remember standing there watching her scream in excitement while my parents beamed with pride. When I turned 16, they told me, "If you want a car, you should start saving up." So while Madison drove to school in her brand new car, I worked after school at a local diner, saving up for a used, beat-up car I could barely afford. It didn't matter that I was the responsible one, the one who never asked for anything extravagant. Madison was always given more. At 18, Madison was fully supported through college. Tuition, covered, books, paid for, rent, taken care of. My parents even sent her spending money every month so she wouldn't have to get a part-time job. Me? I was told, "You're independent enough to handle it yourself." That was their excuse every time. "You're good at managing money, Anna. You'll figure it out. You don't need help the way Madison does." I worked 2 part-time jobs while balancing classes. I barely slept, barely had time for anything but studying and working. And my parents, they sent Madison on vacations during school breaks while I stayed behind, too exhausted and too broke to do anything. I should have realized then. I should have understood that no matter how hard I tried, I would never be treated the same way. But I didn't, not yet. I kept convincing myself it wasn't that bad, that maybe one day things would even out, that maybe one day they would see me too. But I was wrong, because the worst was still coming, because the worst betrayal was still coming. When I turned 24, I finally thought I had made it. I had worked my way through college, landed a stable job in marketing, and was finally ready to buy my first home. I wasn't asking my parents for money. I had saved up every penny myself. And then one day they called me over for a family meeting. I was excited, nervous. I thought they were proud of me. But when I sat down in the living room, the truth hit me like a punch to the stomach. "We have something important to tell you," my father said. Then my mother smiled. "We gave Madison the house." I stared at them, confused. What house? My house. The house I had been saving for. The house I had spent years working toward. The house I had already spoken to a realtor about. They had bought it behind my back. for Madison. And just like that, everything I had worked for was stolen from me. And that was just the beginning. Because I wasn't just losing the house. I was losing my family. I stormed out of my parents' house that day, shaking with anger. I barely remember the drive home, just the overwhelming sense of betrayal crashing over me. For years, they promised that money was for my wedding. For years, I believed them, and in the end, it was just another thing they took from me to give to Madison. I didn't know how to tell Daniel. I knew he would be angry, but part of me also felt embarrassed, as if asking my parents for the money they had promised me made me greedy, as if expecting fairness made me the problem. But when I finally told him, his reaction was exactly what I needed. "Are you serious?" Daniel's voice was sharp. "They gave away your wedding fund and didn't even tell you?" I nodded, biting my lip. "They said we're independent enough to pay for it ourselves." He let out a bitter laugh. "Unbelievable." Then he frowned. "Emily, do you still want them at the wedding?" That question hit me harder than I expected, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure. I ignored my parents' calls for days, but Madison? She had no idea what had happened. At least that's what she claimed, because a week later she showed up at my apartment, all smiles as if nothing was wrong. "Hey, big sis, I wanted to see how the wedding planning was going." I stared at her. She was glowing, dressed in designer clothes, nails freshly manicured, her perfect life untouched by any struggle. The life my parents had handed to her, and she had the audacity to ask about my wedding. I clenched my jaw. "Madison, did you know?" She blinked. "Know what?" "That Mom and Dad gave you my wedding fund." Her smile froze. A flicker of something, guilt, crossed her face, but it was gone in an instant. "Emily, She let out a nervous laugh. "I didn't know they had promised it to you." I folded my arms. "But you took the money," she swallowed. "I mean, yeah, but I needed it for the house. Ryan and I don't care about you and Ryan." She looked offended, but I was too angry to stop. "You knew they were helping you with the down payment, and you never thought to ask where that money came from?" Madison fidgeted. "I just assumed," I waited, "that they would do the same for you." I laughed, a hollow, bitter laugh. "They never would have," I said coldly. "And you know it." She didn't deny it. Instead, she sighed dramatically. "Look, Emily, I get that you're upset, but you'll be fine. You and Daniel both have great jobs, and weddings don't have to be expensive. Maybe just scale it down?" I felt something inside me snap. Scale it down. Because Madison had already taken enough from me, and now I was supposed to just accept it? I took a deep breath. "Madison, let me ask you something." She looked hesitant. "Okay? If our parents had saved up a house fund for me, would you have let them give it to me instead of you?" Her face fell. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The silence was enough. I nodded, my decision made. "Thanks for stopping by, Madison," I said, opening the door. "I think we're done here." She looked stunned. "Wait, Emily." But I was done listening. I had spent my entire life playing the quiet, understanding sister, but not anymore. For the first time, I wasn't going to bend over backward to make things work. For the first time, I was putting myself first. And if my parents didn't like that, then maybe they didn't belong at my wedding at all. After Madison left, I sat in silence, gripping the edge of my kitchen counter. I had never stood up to her like that before. For years, I had let things go, pretending the favoritism didn't bother me. But this time was different. They took something from me, something that was mine, and they didn't even think I deserved to be upset. I checked my phone, missed calls, Mom, 5, Dad, 3. I didn't want to hear their excuses, because there were no excuses left. So I made a decision. I wasn't just cutting them off financially, I was cutting them off completely. Daniel and I sat in the living room that night, the guest list spread out in front of us. I took a deep breath. "I don't want them at the wedding." He studied my face, then nodded. "Okay." I hesitated. "Just like that?" He reached for my hand. "Emily, after everything they've done to you, do you really think they deserve to be there?" I swallowed. No, they didn't. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I sent my parents a text. "I've thought about it, and I don't want you at my wedding. You made it clear who matters most in this family, and it was never me. I don't need your support, financial or otherwise. Please respect my decision." I stared at my phone, heart pounding. Within seconds, my mother called. I let it ring. Then a text came through. "Emily, you can't be serious. We're your parents. Of course we're coming to your wedding. You're overreacting. It was just money, sweetheart. We love you." I laughed, a hollow, bitter laugh. "Just money? No, it wasn't just money. It was years of being second place." I didn't respond. Then another text came through. "Emily, this is ridiculous. You can't ban your own parents from your wedding. If you do this, you'll regret it. Madison never meant to take anything from you. You're being selfish. Selfish." That was the moment I knew. They weren't sorry. They weren't even remotely aware of how much they had hurt me. They expected me to just accept it, not this time. I blocked their numbers. Then I crossed their names off the guest list, and for the first time, I felt free. The next few weeks were a storm of family drama. My parents were furious. Madison tried to fix things, but I ignored her. Relatives started taking sides. Some of my aunts and uncles completely understood my decision. Others told me I was overreacting and causing unnecessary drama. But I didn't care. For once, I was putting myself first, and when my wedding day arrived, it was perfect. I walked down the aisle knowing that everyone in that room was there because they truly loved and supported me. No forced smiles, no fake apologies, just me, Daniel, and the people who actually mattered. I thought cutting my parents off would be the end of it, that after I told them they weren't invited, they would just accept it and move on. But I underestimated something. They had an image to protect. At first, they tried to guilt trip me in private, calling, texting, even sending emails filled with emotional manipulation about how I was tearing the family apart. When that didn't work, they turned to damage control. They started reaching out to relatives, telling their version of the story before I could. And suddenly, my phone started blowing up. The first call came from my Aunt Lisa, one of my dad's sisters. I picked up, expecting the worst. "Emily, sweetie," she sighed, "your mother just called me in tears. What's going on?" I exhaled slowly and kept my voice calm. "Did she tell you what they did?" There was a pause. "She said you're upset over money, but Emily, they're your parents. Are you really going to ban them from your wedding over this?" I felt a sharp pang of frustration. They made it sound so simple, as if this was just about money. But I had spent years being second to Madison. This was just the final proof that I would never be as important as her. "Aunt Lisa," I said, voice tight, "they took the wedding fund they promised me for years and gave it to Madison for her house without even telling me." Silence, then a soft, uncomfortable cough. "Oh," I let that sink in. "And then when I got upset, they told me I was overreacting and being selfish." Aunt Lisa cleared her throat. "That part they didn't mention." Of course they didn't. It didn't take long before the whole family found out. Some relatives sided with me. Aunt Lisa actually apologized for assuming the worst and said she completely understood why I was hurt. My mom's younger sister, Aunt Denise, called me to say she had seen this favoritism for years and was glad I was finally standing up for myself. Even my grandmother, who usually avoided drama, told my mom she was disappointed in how they handled things. But then there were the others, the ones who acted like I was the villain. Uncle Mark, my dad's brother, texted me saying I was acting childish and punishing my parents for a simple mistake. Cousin Lauren, who had always been close to Madison, sent me a long paragraph about how Madison didn't deserve to be dragged into this and how family is more important than money. And worst of all, my mom's best friend Carol called me just to say, "You're going to regret this when they're gone." I hung up. I wasn't going to let them guilt me into backing down. But the worst part, Madison finally spoke up. She hadn't tried to talk to me since our last conversation, but a few days later she sent me a long text. "Madison, Emily, I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this. I didn't steal from you. Mom and Dad made a decision. Why are you punishing me for something I had no control over?" I stared at my phone, furious. No control? She took the money without question. She never even thought to ask where it came from. And now she was acting like the victim. I texted back. "Me. You had no problem taking what was meant for me. You knew our parents always gave you more and you let them do it again. So no, Madison, you're not innocent in this." I expected her to apologize. Instead, she replied, "Madison, if you uninvite Mom and Dad from your wedding, don't expect me to show up either." I let out a bitter laugh. She thought that was a threat. She thought I would beg her to come. Instead, I wrote back one word. Me. "Okay." And for the first time, I meant it. The wedding was approaching fast. My guest list was finalized, and for the first time, my family was split down the middle. Half supported me, half thought I was an ungrateful daughter. But at the end of the day, I wasn't backing down, because if my parents weren't willing to treat me with respect, then they didn't deserve to be there, and neither did Madison. As the wedding day got closer, I felt lighter than I ever had before. I had spent my entire life fighting for my parents' approval, for some kind of fairness between me and Madison. But now I didn't care anymore. I had my own life, my own happiness, my own wedding to focus on. The guest list was finalized, the seating chart set, and there was no spot for my parents or my sister. Daniel and I were ready, but if I thought they would stay quiet and accept my decision, I was dead wrong. 2 weeks before the wedding, my phone rang. Mom. I considered ignoring it, but something in me wanted to hear what excuse they would come up with this time. I picked up. "Emily, Mom sighed, voice dripping with forced sadness. Do we really have to do this? I clenched my jaw. Do what? This fight. I almost laughed, as if this was just some misunderstanding. Mom, I'm not the one who made this choice. You did. Silence. Then she tried another tactic. I know we upset you, but banning us from your wedding, it's too far. I took a deep breath. Mom, I begged you for fairness. I begged you to just consider me for once. And instead, you told me I was being selfish. You told me Madison needed it more. She did, Mom snapped, suddenly frustrated. You and Daniel could afford your wedding. She couldn't afford her house without our help. I closed my eyes. There it was. They still didn't see anything wrong with what they did. They still believed that Madison deserved more than me. I was done. Then you should be at Madison's housewarming party instead of my wedding. And I hung up. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I had made myself clear. But on my wedding day, as I was getting ready in the bridal suite, my cousin Rachel ran in, breathless. Emily, your parents are here. My stomach dropped. No, they wouldn't. But when I looked out the window, I saw them standing near the entrance, waiting. My mother, my father, and Madison. They weren't invited. And yet, they came. I marched out of the bridal suite, Daniel close behind me. As soon as my parents saw me, my mom rushed forward. Emily, sweetheart, we couldn't just miss your wedding. My fists clenched. You weren't invited. She flinched, as if she was the victim here. We're your parents. We have a right to be here. I shook my head. No, you don't. My dad crossed his arms. Emily, don't do this. Let us in. And then Madison spoke. Emily, just let it go. You're being ridiculous. I turned to her, rage boiling in my chest. You have no idea what this day means to me, do you? I whispered. You never cared, because you never had to fight for anything. But this is mine, and you don't get to take this from me too. Madison scoffed, rolling her eyes. Whatever. Enjoy your little tantrum. And that's when Daniel stepped forward. You heard her. Leave. Madison opened her mouth to argue, but my father grabbed her arm. For the first time I saw it, defeat in his eyes. They weren't going to win this time. Without another word, they turned and walked away. When I walked down the aisle, I felt free. For the first time, I wasn't looking for my parents' approval. For the first time, I wasn't worried about Madison stealing the spotlight. It was just me, Daniel, and the people who truly loved us. The family I had chosen. And as I said, I realized something. I hadn't just lost my parents that day. I had gained a new life, a life where I wasn't second place anymore, a life where I was finally enough. After my parents and Madison were forced to leave my wedding, I expected immediate backlash. I thought they'd call, text, maybe even show up at the reception to cause a scene, but they didn't. They went completely silent. At first, I was relieved, but as the days passed, that relief turned into something else, something unsettling. Because if my parents had taught me anything, it was that they never let things go. So, I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. A week after the wedding, a text from Aunt Lisa popped up on my phone. Aunt Lisa, hey sweetheart, I just thought you should know, your parents are telling everyone you banned them from the wedding out of spite. My stomach twisted. Of course they were. Me, what exactly are they saying? Her next message made me furious. Aunt Lisa, they're telling people you had a meltdown over money and cut them off without warning. They're saying you refused to talk things out and that you're punishing them over something small. I exhaled sharply. They were rewriting history. They weren't telling people they took the wedding fund I was promised. They weren't telling people they gave it to Madison. They weren't telling people they acted like it was no big deal. They were playing the victims. Over the next few weeks, I found out my parents had been calling relatives, painting me as a selfish, dramatic daughter who had turned her back on family. Some relatives saw right through it. Aunt Lisa, Aunt Denise, and a few others took my side, but others, they bought into the lie. Cousin Lauren, they're your parents, Emily. You really banned them from your wedding over money? Uncle Mark, they were trying to help Madison, that's all. You overreacted. Mom's best friend Carol, you'll regret this when they're gone. And the worst, Grandma called. I picked up, heart pounding, because she had always been neutral. Emily, sweetheart, she said softly, I know things got messy, but don't you think you should make peace? There it was, the expectation that I should be the one to fix things, that I should be the one to reach out. But I wasn't going to do that. Not this time. Grandma, would you have forgiven them if they had done this to you? She was quiet for a long time. Then, finally, she sighed. No. And that was the last time she tried to convince me. A month after the wedding, I got a text from Madison. I almost didn't read it, but curiosity won. Madison, hey, can we talk? I frowned. I hadn't heard from her since the wedding. Me, about what? Her next message was so predictable, it almost made me laugh. Madison, I just think this has gone on long enough. You need to fix things with mom and dad. There it was. Not an apology, not an acknowledgement of what she did. Just another way of saying, this is your fault, Emily. Fix it. I didn't even argue. I just wrote back, me, we don't have anything to talk about. And I blocked her. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for their approval. I wasn't hoping for an apology. I wasn't desperate for them to understand. I was done. Daniel and I focused on our lives, our future. And without the constant pressure of trying to please a family that never saw me as equal, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. But this wasn't over yet. Because 6 months later, something happened that changed everything. My parents called, and they weren't asking for forgiveness. They were asking for help. 6 months had passed since my wedding. 6 months of silence from my parents. I had finally moved on. I wasn't angry anymore. I just didn't care. Until one night, my phone rang. I stared at the screen. Mom. At first, I thought it was an accident. But then my phone buzzed again. Another call, then another. Something was wrong. Against my better judgment, I picked up. Emily? My mother's voice sounded shaky. We need your help. I sat in stunned silence as she explained. Madison was in serious trouble. After she and Ryan bought their house with my wedding fund, they had stretched themselves too thin. They racked up massive debt trying to keep up their perfect lifestyle. And now, they were on the verge of losing everything. I felt nothing. No sympathy, no sadness, just a simple, cold realization. They only called me because they wanted something. We need you to help Madison financially, Mom said, her voice cracking. I blinked. Excuse me? She's struggling, Emily. She could lose the house. She and Ryan are drowning in debt. We're helping as much as we can, but we can't do it alone. I almost laughed. They wanted me to save the house they took my wedding fund to buy. The irony was almost too much. Why would I do that? I asked flatly. Mom sucked in a breath. Because she's your sister. I let out a bitter laugh. You mean the same sister who took what was meant for me? The same sister who told me to let it go when I was hurting? The same sister who called me ridiculous for setting boundaries? Silence. Dad took the phone. His voice was harsher. Emily, stop being petty. This is serious. Madison could lose everything. And that's when it hit me. They weren't really worried about Madison. They were worried about their own image. If Madison lost the house, if their golden child failed, it would be a humiliation for them. That's why they were calling me. Not because they regretted what they did, not because they missed me, but because they needed me to clean up their mess. And for the first time in my life, I had all the power. I took a deep breath, and then I said it. No. Silence. Then Mom gasped as if I had just slapped her. Emily, you can't just... Yes, I can. I cut her off. You had no problem leaving me to fend for myself when I needed you. Now it's Madison's turn. Dad's voice hardened. You're being selfish. No, I said again, calm and certain. I'm just treating Madison the way you always treated me. And then I hung up. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. After that call, my parents tried everything. They had relatives call me, trying to guilt me. Madison sent me a long text, calling me cruel. Even Ryan, who had never cared about me before, messaged me, begging for help. I ignored all of them. And then finally, my parents sent me one last message. If you walk away from us now, don't bother coming back. I stared at the screen for a long moment. And then I smiled. Okay, and I blocked their numbers. A year passed. Madison and Ryan lost their house. My parents stopped trying to contact me. I never looked back. And you know what? I was happier than ever. I had Daniel. Real friends, a chosen family. I had a life where I wasn't constantly begging for approval that would never come. A life where I was finally free. And I never regretted my decision. Not even once. It had been over a year since I cut off my parents. A year of silence. A year of peace. A year of learning what life felt like without constantly trying to prove I was worth loving. I thought about them sometimes. Not with sadness, but with a strange sense of clarity. They had always treated me like I was second best. They had always expected me to be the responsible one, the understanding one, the one who sacrificed. And when I finally stopped playing that role, they had no idea how to handle it. I wasn't expecting it. Daniel and I had gone out for brunch one Saturday morning, just enjoying a normal day. And that's when I saw them, my parents, and Madison, sitting at a corner table at the same restaurant. And they saw me too. For a moment, no one moved. My mother's face froze in shock. Madison looked away, pretending she didn't see me. And my father? He just stared, his jaw tight. Daniel leaned toward me. Do you want to leave? I took a deep breath. No, I wasn't afraid of them anymore. So I lifted my head and walked right past them like they didn't exist, like they were just strangers, like they had never mattered. We had just sat down at our table when I heard it. Emily. I turned slowly. My mother was standing beside our table looking at me like she was seeing me for the first time in her life. I sighed. What do you want, Mom? She looked uncomfortable, like she didn't know what to say. We haven't talked in a long time. I gave her a blank stare. Whose fault is that? She frowned. Sweetheart, I know things got out of hand, but do you really want this? To be estranged? Estranged. Like it just happened. Like they weren't the ones who made their choice first. I didn't even bother answering. I just stared at her, waiting for her to say what she really came here to say. And sure enough, after a long pause, she did. Madison and Ryan are still struggling, she admitted. They could really use some support. There it was, the real reason she was here. Not to fix things, not to apologize, not because she missed me, but because she still thought I owed something to Madison. I let out a slow, bitter laugh. Mom, do you realize this is the first time you've spoken to me in a year? She flinched. And even now, I continued, you're not here for me. You're here for Madison. She opened her mouth to protest, but she didn't have to, because we both knew it was true. I stood up, dropping my napkin on the table. Don't ever reach out to me again, I said calmly. Her eyes widened. Emily, wait! No, I cut her off, my voice steady. I gave you every chance. I begged you to treat me as an equal. You didn't. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine. She looked stunned, like she had never expected me to actually walk away for good, like she still thought I would come back eventually, but I wasn't that girl anymore. So I turned and walked out of that restaurant, leaving her behind. And for the first time in my life, I knew I was finally free. Walking out of that restaurant was the final goodbye, not just to my mother, but to the life I had spent years trying to fix. For so long, I had fought for a place in a family that never truly wanted me there. I had spent years proving myself, trying to earn their approval, trying to be seen. But that day, I finally realized I didn't need their validation. I was enough on my own. After that, my parents stopped trying to reach out. There were no more guilt-trip texts, no phone calls, no relatives trying to talk some sense into me. And Madison? She stayed quiet too, maybe because she finally understood. Maybe because she realized she had already taken too much, or maybe because she was too embarrassed to ask me for anything else. Either way, it didn't matter. For the first time, they weren't a part of my life at all, and it felt amazing. The strangest part about cutting them off wasn't the anger, it was the peace. For the first time, I wasn't walking on eggshells. I wasn't carrying the weight of being the forgotten child. I wasn't comparing myself to Madison. I wasn't waiting for them to finally choose me. I was just living. For the first time, my days weren't filled with resentment or trying to prove my worth to people who would never truly see me. Daniel and I traveled more, built our own little traditions, and created a home filled with love, respect, and the kind of warmth I had never known growing up. I started reconnecting with the people who had actually stood by me, Aunt Lisa, Aunt Denise, and the relatives who had always seen the truth, but never had the power to change it. They welcomed me with open arms, and for the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider in my own family. And most importantly, I stopped feeling guilty. I had spent my whole life believing that family was something you had to fight for, that if I just tried hard enough, I could earn my place in their hearts. But now, I realize something else. Family isn't about blood. It's about who truly stands by you. And my parents, Madison, they had never been my family. Not in the way that mattered. A year later, on my first wedding anniversary, I got a message, an unknown number. I already knew who it was before I even opened it. Mom, I hope you're doing well. We miss you. Happy anniversary. For a moment, I just stared at it. Not with anger, not with sadness, not with that deep, aching pain I used to feel when they let me down. Just indifference, no desperate need for closure, no lingering hope that they had changed, just the simple, peaceful understanding that I had finally moved on. I didn't respond. I didn't overthink it. I just deleted the message and continued enjoying my life, the one I had built without them, because I wasn't that girl anymore, and for the first time in my life, I was truly, completely free.